Welcome back, folks. We're going to take a look at the slam skill changes coming in Path of Exile Harvest. I'm very excited about this, especially in conjunction with the really juicy Warcry stuff we saw before. So, as a quick catch-up, they made a new category of skills called slams. So, things you'd reckon would be slams are now slams. Ground slam, tectonic slam, for example, leap slam, things like that. But also a few other things like earthquake and perforate and things like that as well. There's a list here we'll get into in a second. They also introduced a new support for slam skills specifically, which is the Fist of War, which I revealed in my initial reveal video. And this post will go over some of the other changes in a bit more detail, as well as a new slam skill that I didn't know there was going to be a new slam skill, but apparently there is. So we're also getting a new slam skill. Yeah, I saw, we saw from the Brain Rattler reveal that has been teased elsewhere that one of the mace bases is getting like a chance to deal double damage as an implicit. It's kind of cool. Yes, I've heard the last line of the post is worth checking out. So let's have a little bit of a read through, have a little bit of a look-see here. So alongside our announcement of Harvest, we revealed a new Fist of War support, which looks very cool. It works with all slam skills except for Val skills and Ancestral War Chief. So Ancestral War Chief must count as a slam, but it's like a totem slam, and this, I guess, is a self-slam. Support gem only. Yes, self-slam. That sounds hot. The following slam skills can be used with Fist of War. Well, firstly, Fist of War makes an ancestor appear above your character and performs a slam in unison with you. But what does it actually do? It just gives you a bunch more damage and increased area of effect. And it's on a cooldown, so it works better with slower skills, because otherwise, if you attack 10 times a second, it might only trigger once. But if you attack 1 time per second, it's probably going to trigger every attack. I don't know the exact times yet. We haven't seen the gem, but something to that effect seems to be the case. So the following skills are slam skills and can be used with Fist of War. So we've got Ground Slam, Tectonic Slam, Earthquake, the new Earthshatter skill, Sunder, Ice Crash, Consecrated Path, Perforate, and Leap Slam, and also Doriani's Touch. They didn't forget Doriani's Touch, which is from the gloves. It's a lightning version of Ice Crash, basically. But good that they didn't forget it, because there was a risk they might have just forgot that skill existed. I'm sure many of you have. So Earthshatter's a new skill. There's a video down here. So we might have a look at the video in a sec, but first we'll read about it. It starts at level 12, so you get pretty early on. That's Merveil's Caverns, if I recall correctly. It sends out 5 damaging fissures in all directions when you slam the ground. At the end of each fissure, a spike bursts from the ground and remains for a short time. I wonder if these are like those physical spike things, like from Unarmed breaches, or if they're just a visual thing. Like, I wonder if they have collision. That would be really annoying if it has collision. If these spikes are in the area of another slam or warcry used by you or an allied player, these spikes will explode, dealing damage in an area around them. So you can slam them or warcry them, or another player can do those to trigger them. The range of the fissures combined with the area of the exploding spikes ends up spreading damage over a large area, with explosions overlapping near the location you slammed. It sounds like a weird mix between like Ground Slam, Earthquake, and Tectonic Strike, but also I guess the Ulnatul Axe, which they revealed as a teaser, which has like a spike explosion thing. I don't know if it's a bit like that. We'll see in the video, I guess. You can alternate between slamming with Earthshatter and using a Warcry, letting you kill enemies around you by detonating your spikes while simultaneously preparing to exert your next use of the skill. It sounds like it would benefit from being a very slow skill, because if you're gonna Warcry after each Earthshatter, that's gonna be a bit weird, but maybe you can Earthshatter several times and then use a Warcry to trigger all of them. That could actually be pretty good. Normally you'd want to Warcry before attacking, so to Warcry after attacking is a bit weird, because everything might already be dead. As well, so it sounds very weird. I'm a little bit apprehensive about the description of this skill, but maybe the video looks amazing. You can also easily leap slam onto your spikes to trigger them. That sounds like a meme. Any exploding spike can detonate other spikes near it. Okay, that's something, so they can trigger a chain reaction. So you can leave a trail of spikes with repeated slams and then set them off by leaping onto one of them. Okay, so you can build up a bunch and then trigger them all at once. I mean, that could be some pretty big burst damage then. Tectonic Slam has received an impressive new visual effect and no longer uses charged slams. It instead counts endurance charges to grant more area of effect and additional damaging cracks in the ground. So the number of endurance charges matters, not just consuming one. This improves the reward for investing endurance charges by providing both a larger and more consistent area of effect. It now consumes endurance charge every 3 slams rather than a random 35% chance. Additional cracks that endurance charges generate can spread out further from the base impact and are more deterministic. So it sounds like overall they made Tectonic Slam much more reliable and consistent, which I've played Tectonic Slam before, I think a couple times even. It's always felt like a pretty decent skill. But yeah, sometimes you'd like slam a pack and leave stuff behind because you'd be expecting a big slam but only get a small one. Tectonic Slam is already pretty good, so if it's more consistent and bigger overall, then that sounds pretty good. Gems that provided extra chance for charged slam now grant additional chance for cracks. So, okay, so it's a bit like that, but it doesn't consume extra endurance charges on the enchant. Perforate now provides flat physical damage that scales as the gem levels. Always good. The distribution of its spikes in Blood Stance has been made more consistent. A higher percentage of its spikes should hit a small target, and investment in area of effect on a number of spikes should keep this percentage of spikes hitting consistent. So Perforate was kind of sneakily one of the highest single target skills in the game, but it was just so awful to use as a single target skill. I've tried, and I always ended up going to something else, just because even though, like, theoretically on paper the damage was ridiculous, it's just so hard to actually use it. So maybe this helps, maybe. It's not super clear if it would help. It sounds like it would a bit. Sandstance's base area starts off slightly smaller, but increases the gem levels. Perforate also provides 1 additional spike at all levels, and also grants 2 additional spikes if you've changed stance recently. It's kind of cute. And 1 additional spike at all levels. Oh, that's not like 1 additional per level. I was going to say 20 spikes at level 20. Wait, what? No, it's just 1 additional spike than before. Okay. The issue with Perforate in the past was that in Sandstance there are large gaps between spikes, which meant that enemies within those gaps would be missed. Yes, that was definitely an issue. The extra spikes it now provides an additional area of effect vastly improve the number of targets that can be hit by a single slam. So that should be a bit more consistent overall. Sandstance often felt better than Bloodstance though, even for single target, weirdly enough. In Bloodstance, increased area of effect can be used to result in a loss to single target damage. And the extra splites from Perforate, I mean, yeah, in reality it kind of did. Oftentimes it felt more impactful using Sandstance on bosses, even though Bloodstance was supposed to be single target. It was a weird skill in many ways. The extra spikes from Perforate enchantment would be placed outside of the range of most small enemies, and therefore wouldn't contribute any damage to single targets. Yeah, unless it was a really big boss. Changes to Perforate improve its ability to hit enemies more reliably, and with a better spread of damage. Okay, Sunder. As part of our effort to encourage classic skill Sunder, right? Encourage slower and heavy hitting slams, Sunder has become much wider and longer, but with a slower cascade. Weird, interesting. It's girthier, but moves along the ground slower. Using Sunder while one cascade is still in motion will cause the existing cascade to end prematurely. Ooh. Yeah. There's another skill that's like that, isn't it? What is it? Wave of Conviction? I guess that Wave of Conviction ends up being pretty good. I don't like the sound of that mechanic, though. The, wait for the Thunder, it looks juicy. Yeah, maybe it's a lot better than it sounds, but the idea of it ending prematurely. I mean, it'll be fine with a slower hitting style, but if you are using it for dual wielding, which was a pretty popular choice for Sunder throughout its history, I feel like you might be making it kind of taper off a little bit too soon often. Well, I'll say cascades always travel a minimum length, so you can still use Sunder effectively with multi-strike and fast-hitting weapons. Okay, so there's a minimum to it at least. So when you're single targeting, I guess, it'll just be sitting on its minimum if you're attacking quickly. It still releases shockwaves, which can overlap when it hit enemies. Leveling the gem no longer scales. It should release more shockwaves now because it's thicker, right? So it'll hit more enemies. So more shockwaves means more overall damage to the pack, which was always Sunder's strength, was the idea. You hit a lot of enemies and it does more damage overall. Leveling the gem no longer scales its radius, but instead scales its area of effect. Overall, it provides better area of effect for slower hitting weapons. Yeah, okay. That makes sense with the way that they've done it. I do appreciate that the way they're designing it there is trying to give some extra benefits to slower hitting styles. As I said in the last when I was reading the last post about Warcries making slower hitting builds in PoE good, is a difficult challenge because of a lot of issues like leech and general tempo of the gameplay and things like that suffer a bit with slower hitting skills. Earthquake, Ground Slam, and Ice Crash. These skills are receiving numerical changes which will be revealed closer to launch. 6% extra damage. In general, the idea is to make them generally stronger. Generally stronger? Generally stronger. Now that's a name. Other slam skills. The other skills that are now categorized as slams are mostly unchanged, but have had their visual effects improved and can be used with the Fist of War support. So they get some buffs potentially because of Fist of War and maybe because of War Cries and things like that. Just changing them to slams might be helpful overall. Also, before I watch the video, there's one line snuck in the bottom here. Oh, Bex. Oh, before you go, you should also know that Ground Slam, Sunder, and Earthquake can also be used unarmed. Enjoy. Oh, biggest news of the post, quite possibly. Ground Slam, Sunder, and Earthquake for face breakers and monk builds, and I guess Doriani's builds, is very big news. That is very big news. Certainly some big love for face breakers there. Cool axe. Wonder if these are new MTXs. I don't recognize them, but there's a lot of MTXs these days. Oh, this is the new one. Woo! Earthshatter. It looks a lot like Sandstance Perforate. Jesus. What's that secondary effect? Is it just the red from Fist of War? Oh, yeah. It's because of the second hit. They've slowed this down. This is in slow motion, by the way. Yeah, the red is from Fist of War. It adds a red effects to the skills. Ice Crash looks so much better. It looked really bad scaled up before, but it looks a lot better now. Looks pretty chunky, right? They're a little bit big, but Ice Crash was always massive. Here's our Sunders. That is a very thick Sunder. Perforate. Perforate looks very similar. Wait, no, is that not... That's Earthshatter, is it? Wait, that's more Earthshatter? I thought that was Perforate. I was going to say, they look very similar. I can't tell the difference between the two. No, that must be Earthshatter. Yeah, this is a new icon behind me over here. So that's Earthshatter again, I think. Oh, yeah, they're like sneaking the war cries in there after each hit. Okay, yeah. The explosions on the Earthshatters look pretty big. Ground Slam looks like Ground Slam. Always a reasonably solid skill. Earthquake looks real good now. Ooh, listen to the sound of Earthquake as well. God. Earthshatter looked better than I thought it might. Looks like a pretty chunky playstyle. It's weird though, it's kind of like Earthquake, but you have to trigger the secondary effect yourself, which doesn't sound very good on paper. There's our Perforates. Okay. Perforate much more sandy looking. Hold on, I'm going back a sec. Show me that Perforate again. It was an exerted Fist of War Perforate. It was pretty big. Bloodstance still looks like far less impactful. Hopefully it's more actually effective. Tectonic looks very good now. Ooh. How sick did the Consecrated Path look with Fist of War, making it all red? I love how it changes the visual. It's very clear which is the Fist of War hit. I like that a lot. So there, okay, that's pretty cool example actually there of the new Earthshatter. So he hits twice, triggers, the wave hits, and then it chain reactions almost immediately. It's pretty fast, the chain reaction, and the AoEs look pretty big. They're like, how does the hits on the initial attack look? I'm curious about that. Because the initial attack hits as well. Yeah, I mean, he's killing mobs with the initial attack as well. So it's only like, what you're probably going to do is you're probably just going to like kill stuff with the regular attack. But if it misses stuff, which it probably will, you'll trigger the explosions. Could be very good for like chunkier targets. Maybe bosses. Could be good for bosses if you stack up a bunch and then trigger it. Because there's quite big gaps, it almost feels like it might suffer from the same problem as Sandstance Perforate, where you're like missing stuff, which is what they fixed with Perforate by adding extra spikes to it, so you're missing less stuff. But it feels like it might be the same issue here, so which means you kind of have to trigger the earth spikes. It looks like the earth spikes don't have collision or anything, or just a visual thing. So you kind of almost have to trigger it each time to kill stragglers. Like, let's go back to the start. Okay, hold on. All right, so yeah, this is a good example. All right, so all of this stuff, all of this stuff, all of this stuff, and some things in here, and some things over here, these all get missed by the initial hit, right? So you definitely... all the like AoE potential of the skill is in the second triggering effect. This very much feels like a Path of Exile 2 skill design, where you're like using multiple skills together a lot more, but it could actually work all right in Path of Exile 1, I think. Later on, this sort of stuff is going to be much better and much more common when we have like, you know, 6 links to play around with or whatever it is. Yeah, it's, I'm still a little unsure on this skill. Like, it looks really chunky and impactful. And there's some potential where you're like smacking down a bunch of earth spikes and then triggering them, and it's like really satisfying damage. Like, I don't know if there's a limit to how, it didn't say anything about limits to how many you can put on the screen. Like, how many earth spikes can you have down? Can you have like 50 earth spikes and then trigger them for a mega explosion on the boss? Yeah, I wonder how it works with General Cry. Do they put a bunch of extra spikes so that you can get even more up? That could be interesting. General's Cry would like trigger them, creating more spikes, but the War Cry itself would detonate the existing war spikes, so then you would have to detonate the spikes again. That would be weird. I guess you could put General's Cry with a... oh, wait, that could be interesting. No, wait, hold on. I'm like... you could make General's Cry use a different slam skill to trigger the spikes, but then I'm like, wait, hold on, the War Cry would trigger the spikes as well. So it doesn't make much sense. Yeah, weird skill. Looks very chunky and cool, but very hard to tell if it's going to be an awkward one to play with. Maybe it'll be great. I don't know, it looks great. Nice crash looking mega chunkers. This post just reiterates to me that I'm loving the look of the War Cry stuff. What's MDXs? With War Cry investment for triggering, you can trigger with other slam skills. I just don't know in what situation you do that. But with War Cry investment to make them like faster to trigger, maybe even like your instant War Cries, that could be pretty nice. You put like instant cast War Cry on left click, and when you go to move, it automatically War Cries. So as soon as you start moving away from the pack, it'll detonate. And if you're using Leap Slam for mobility anyway, you'll probably end up detonating with that sometimes too. I don't know how close you have to... if you have any AoE scaling, your Leap Slam's AoE is probably big enough to trigger any spikes, even if you're not specifically having to aim for them. If you specifically have to like jump right on top of them, it would be really awkward. Also, that'd be like skewering yourself. Not really, but that's kind of what it would be like. It's a weird idea. But AoE Leap Slam, maybe even you put chuck AoE on Leap Slam to make it chunkies. Could do a decent job of triggering it too. Yes. Okay, looks cool, but yeah, unsure of how it'll end up playing for sure. There's potential there. It's not like when we saw Infernal Cry and it's like, oh my god, this is actually busted. It's like, this looks like it could be good. Very hard to tell how it'll feel to play. Overall, I think I'm liking the slam changes. I love the look of the Fist of War support. Really curious to see what the cooldown on it is. It seems relatively short, like less than a second for the cooldown. So it might work on anything that's not like super fast attack builds, but should certainly be pretty comfortable on any two-handed builds. So the Fist of War stuff looks pretty sick. The visuals on it are great as well. But from what I've seen in the videos, the AoE boost, it's hard to tell. You can't really tell damage from these videos ever. But the AoE boost is pretty major, so maybe it's... I would expect that it's a pretty big damage boost, right? Because if you look at regular support gems that give like 30 to 60-ish, so let's say 30 to 50% more damage, right? Something like Fist of War, I would expect the slam is like 60% more damage, roughly, minimum. Maybe it starts at like 50 and goes up to 65 or 70% more damage with the slam. I would expect, because it's got a cooldown, it's not necessarily going to trigger on every hit. And it's got some AoE in it that probably wouldn't go any higher than that, but I would expect something like that, which is pretty impactful and would probably feel pretty good. You reckon it has to be at least 100% more? I don't know. Maybe not with the AoE built into it as well. Maybe they go nuts on it and they're just like 120% more damage. Then if in that, think about it that way. Like if it's 100% and you're on average triggering 1 out of every 3 hits or something, if you're just standing there slamming, which is probably roughly what I've seen with the some of the videos, some of the slow attacking videos, it's been like every 2nd hit. But say you can actually have stacked some attack speed, you're like getting every 3rd hit is triggering. 30% more damage puts it in line with like kind of other shitty-ish gems, but still gives AoE. So something like 60% or something would maybe fit pretty well. I don't know, maybe 100 wouldn't be that crazy then, since it is potentially triggering on every 2nd or 3rd hit. It kind of averages out as being like a 33% more damage. That's maybe not too terrible, given that it's also given a chunk of AoE. But yeah, it looks good. Skill changes seem pretty good. We'll see how Earthshatter plays out. It looks pretty satisfying. The good news is that if you try Earthshatter and don't like it, you can just easily swap to any of these other ones, especially Earthquake. So I wouldn't be afraid to try an Earthshatter build next league if you're curious. Just give it a go, because you can always just swap to Earthquake. Or pretty much any of these other ones, potentially. Looks good, though. Cool stuff. I'm loving the chunky big stick league. Hell yeah.